How be you, folks? Transient shape-shifting aliens. I'm Odd, by the way. Today I'm going to be redesigning one of my older characters, because I've been on a bit of an OC kick lately. And basically that means I'm either creating new kind of one-off characters, or I'm going back to my old ones. And one of the ones that I definitely like coming back around to is my original character, Satellite. They're a shape-shifting alien. And when I came to find them in my backlog of Twitter pages, I suppose, I noticed their old reference photo, and I swear I made another one. Maybe I just didn't post it onto Twitter, which is unthinkable now, but I did have a moment where I was sparsely posting to Twitter and mainly posting on DeviantArt. I saw their reference photo, or reference page, basically, and their name is Satellite, not necessarily because they're, a non-earthly being, but because their ears are supposed to resemble a dish satellite. And I think that they were too small. I looked at that reference and I was like, really? No. More. Those little ears were nothing. So one of the things that I did, and it kind of gave them the proportions of a chihuahua, which I think was the initial idea, was that I made their head much smaller in comparison to their ears, and their body much smaller in proportion to their head. I think that it created this nice shape design, and I think that my initial intention was always to have them be fairly simple, but I guess still believable to some degree, but a little alien, because they are alien. And I think that I finally kind of got a design that was a bit more uniquely them. And I think it's funny because you can tell my preference toward drawing dogs in their original reference, because they very much look like one and their dog form didn't look all that different. And that's kind of the thing about this character, Satellite, is that even though they are a shape-shifting alien, they aren't very good at it, so they kind of wind up with these strange, very almost creepy caricatures of animals. And so I made a reference of a dog and a cat. And it's funny because I know that if I were to go in and my other old OCs make a human reference for them, I would make them as though they were human. I would probably not necessarily make a Ginjinka, but go in as though they are attempting to imitate a human, which I feel like would be terrifying. Maybe a little cute. They'd probably just look like a gray alien, honestly. It's Satellite is fully responsible for the existence of grays. They don't actually exist, it's just this poor little bat creature trying to imitate humanity. Now, I think that they tend to prefer quadrupedal animals. I don't know necessarily if they could stand on those hind legs. I think they could if they tried, because they've got little grabby hands. But yeah, I wanted something a bit more cohesive before they kind of looked a little mishmashed, which I guess was kind of the idea with this chimera-like design. But I wanted their form to be a bit more just one creature, while still almost looking like an amalgate, so you couldn't really tell if they were imitating some other combination of their favorite creatures, or if this was their true form, which they do rarely show sometimes. And while I was designing those sort of shiny almost pupilless eyes that they always have had, I came to a conclusion that I thought, initially they might not be intelligent enough, or possibly they were a little self-centered, but I think now it's more they don't see very well. Along with this new reference, which I think turned out very cutely, I am going to be redoing a piece that I made that was one of my favorites when I initially made Satellite. So possibly a few years after I did make them, in fact. So yeah, you probably saw it in my little references that I pulled up to the side, and it was Satellite kind of hanging out by this sign that said UFO crossing. And I always wanted to replicate that. I think that from the time that I made it, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be a progress piece, and I never really redid it the following years, but I am happy to have finally gotten around to it. I think it was similar with the original one, that I wound up going for a much smaller size, because painterly pieces, like no lines pieces for me, tend to go better if the canvas is just so much smaller, because it's just hell to try and get like a super high quality big canvas image to look nice, I think. And people that do it, they're just extremely talented because you've got so much pixel space, you know? So yeah, the idea was mainly just to kind of shake the rust off for this sort of piece. So is it necessarily my favorite? Is it even finished? I'm not totally sure. But yeah, I tried this method. Thank you, Tulsi. I tried this method of... Sorry, my cat keeps knocking stuff over. Hello, love. Go down here. Drawing in sort of like an outline, and then using my usual method of like on the same layer this time of filling in those lines, and then sort of going in with the shading methods that I wanted to. I think that even though I do enjoy, regardless of the maybe lack of skill level, the original, I do think that it still kind of has a place. What are you doing? A place in my heart, and I might work on this one a little bit more on and off, or just redo it at some point or another, because like it's nice and I like seeing Satellite in that situation. I just I didn't have necessarily like, oh, pom pom, gotcha. I didn't have as nice of a situation it felt like with this, although I did really like how much more, I guess, like centered the design seemed around Satellite and the road sign, which is going to be obviously the like alien exiting sign. And I had to actually go in and close my program, so there's probably going to be a stop here before you see the remainder of the piece, and like the actual sign itself. I think this part is mainly majority me working on the picture of Satellite. So I kind of, it still does feel kind of thrown together to me, and I can't really put my finger on it. It both does and doesn't feel like a more cohesive image. I don't know. I love Satellite's character overall, because I have these moments where I don't necessarily focus on this character, because they don't have as much of a, you know, like a worldly story, but they are like a part of me. I think there was this notion of, I did think there was this sort of notion of, especially when I was younger, this feeling of alienation and feeling like I wasn't good at emulating being someone else, you know, being a little bit more human, you know? I don't know if it's necessarily a universal thing. It might be a neurodivergent thing, just that might be masking overall, because it feels like you're just imitating something poorly. And I don't necessarily think that was my main goal when creating Satellite. Because they were based off of an old character of mine that I made in like, I don't know, first grade, and I was like, I like that concept. Let's check back. Let's touch back on that. And obviously they changed like completely, but it was similar, of this like alien who could shapeshift, but when like one time they got stuck as like a whole bunch of different animals, and they had to figure out how to coordinate that and make their way back to themselves. So yeah, like I think that it was kind of my characters, I think, whether or not I know it or not, are this sort of note into my psyche. Okay, now here is probably where I pulled up the piece again, and I learned, I know the last time that I did this, but I totally forgot that the font that is used for these road signs is called Highway Gothic, which is just so cool. At least in the States. I think it might be a little bit different depending on where you're at. But at least in the US, we have a bunch of these signs, and it's like either white or black, and they sort of, they obviously have some small sign words on them, like yield or stop. And then, of course, you've got the exiting signs, which are not exiting, crossing. So when I was younger, I always thought that the Xing signs were saying exiting, like animals exiting across the street, which I guess also makes sense and is a good mnemonic, but it's crossing, like, you know, the Nintendo game, Animal Crossing. And for the longest time, because it looks like an X and not a cross, it looks like, you know, exiting. I don't know if that's just me, but that was my initial misinterpretation of it. I swear I've seen so many of these weird signs, and I would honestly love, like, a sign or a shirt that said UFO exiting. I'm sure they exist. Like, around, like, the Roswell area or something like that, they might totally, like, have, like, UFO alien exiting signs, which would be great, because exiting. I said exiting again. Crossing. UFO crossing. But yeah, I liked how this turned out. I do like that I was able to get the kind of iridescent feeling of the sign a little bit more. I went in with a couple of colors, like a rainbow, basically, in kind of like a glow overlay layer on the lighted areas to make it just seem a little bit more like the super reflective, you know, like night glow sort of signs. Because it's like, you know, they're made to be kind of translucent, so that, or not translucent? Kind of, yeah, but like the metal is made to be kind of, or like the gloss, to make the yellow just glow. And it's all these different, like, colors and stuff like that kind of layered over it. It's interesting. It's like glow-in-the-dark, like crossing guard uniforms and stuff like that, you know? Yeah, that is both of these pieces. I think that they turned out really cutely. I'm really happy to have a bit more of a cohesive design with Satellite. What other, like, types of things do you think that Satellite would interpret? I am already having something in mind that I will hopefully, hold me to it, have up next week. I want to upload more consistently, and I want to do some holiday stuff. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. There might be some reindeer involved. And Satellite's going to be the perfect little weird deer. So at that, I think I'm going to leave this here. Let me know what you think. Possibly leave a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see some more weird art antics. And I will see y'all next time.